The night was falling fast over the desolate road in North Carolina, the wind howling like a lost lament. It was a solemn scene, but what was about to happen would make this night unforgettable. In a fraction of a second, a small baby, wrapped in a dirty blanket, was left at the mercy of fate. An unthinkable decision, a life abandoned. The heart of any onlooker would tighten at the thought of Jackson, a newborn who, unknowingly, was about to face the most formidable challenges of his existence. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth as darkness crept across the landscape. The road, a narrow strip of asphalt cutting through dense forest, seemed to stretch endlessly into the gathering gloom. Crickets chirped hesitantly, their song nearly drowned out by the mournful wind that whipped through the trees, sending leaves skittering across the pavement. A lone car appeared on the horizon, its headlights cutting through the darkness like twin beacons. As it approached, the engine's low rumble broke the eerie silence. The vehicle, an old sedan with peeling paint and a slightly bent fender, slowed to a crawl. Its tires crunched on the loose gravel at the roadside as it came to a stop. For a moment, all was still. Then, the driver's door creaked open, and a figure emerged. In the dim light, it was hard to make out details, but the silhouette suggested a woman, her movements hesitant and burdened. She moved to the back door, opened it, and leaned inside. When she straightened, she was cradling a small bundle wrapped in a faded, dirty blanket. The woman stood there, swaying slightly, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. A tiny whimper emerged from the bundle, quickly stifled as she hugged it closer to her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I'm so sorry." With trembling hands, she bent down and placed the bundle on the ground, just off the side of the road. For a heartbeat, she remained crouched, her hand lingering on the blanket. Then, as if burned, she yanked it away and stumbled back to the car. The engine roared to life, and the car peeled away, leaving behind a swirl of dust and the faint scent of burning rubber. And there, on the cold, hard ground, lay Jackson, oblivious to the life-altering moment that had just transpired. The baby stirred, his tiny face scrunching up as the cool night air nipped at his exposed skin. His eyes, still unfocused, blinked open, revealing irises as dark as the night sky above. A soft whimper escaped his lips, growing louder as he realized the warmth of his mother's arms was gone. Jackson's cries echoed through the empty forest, a plaintive wail that spoke of hunger, discomfort, and a primal fear of abandonment. But there was no one to hear him, no one to comfort him. The trees stood silent sentinel, their branches swaying in the wind, indifferent to the tiny life left in their midst. Hours passed, and still Jackson cried. His little body trembled with the effort, his face red and tear-stained. The dirty blanket provided little protection against the chill of the night, and dew began to settle on its rough fabric. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the scene, Jackson's cries began to weaken. Exhaustion was setting in, his tiny body pushed to its limits. His movements became sluggish, his whimpers softer. It was then that fate intervened. A rustle in the underbrush nearby caught no one's attention, for there was no one to notice. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with surprising stealth for its size. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath the brim of a worn baseball cap. The man paused at the edge of the road, his head cocked to one side as if listening. Then, with careful steps, he approached the bundle on the ground. As he drew closer, Jackson's whimpers reached his ears, and the man's pace quickened. Kneeling beside the baby, the man's rough hands gently unwrapped the blanket. His sharp intake of breath was audible as he revealed Jackson's tiny form. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, his voice a low rumble. "What kind of monster would leave you out here, little one?" With infinite care, he scooped Jackson into his arms, cradling the baby against his chest. Jackson's cries subsided almost immediately, comforted by the warmth and the steady beat of the man's heart. "Don't you worry, little guy," the man said softly. "I've got you now. Name's Frank, and I reckon you and I are gonna be good friends." Frank stood, scanning the area one last time before turning and heading back into the forest. His long strides ate up the ground, and soon the road was lost to sight behind them. As they traveled deeper into the woods, Frank spoke quietly to Jackson, his deep voice soothing the baby's occasional whimpers. "I know this ain't exactly normal, kid, but then again, nothing about this night is normal, is it? I live out here, away from all the noise and bustle. It's peaceful, most of the time. Lonely, too, if I'm being honest. But I reckon that's about to change." The forest around them was alive with night sounds, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. But Jackson, exhausted from his ordeal, had fallen into a deep sleep, lulled by the rhythm of Frank's steady pace and the warmth of his embrace. After what seemed like hours of walking, the trees began to thin, and a small clearing came into view. In the center stood a cabin, its weathered logs silvered by years of sun and rain. A thin trail of smoke rose from the stone chimney, promising warmth and safety within. Frank paused at the edge of the clearing, looking down at the sleeping baby in his arms. "Well, little Jackson," he said, the name coming to him suddenly and feeling right, "welcome to your new home. It ain't much, but it's sturdy and warm, and I promise you'll never be alone here." As they approached the cabin, a dog's bark shattered the night silence. A large, shaggy mutt came bounding around the corner of the building, tail wagging furiously. "Easy, Blue," Frank called softly. "We've got company, and he needs some peace and quiet." Blue, sensing the importance of the moment, fell silent, though his tail continued to wag as he followed Frank up the porch steps. Inside, the cabin was small but cozy. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting a warm glow over the simple furnishings. Frank moved with purpose, gathering blankets and pillows to create a makeshift bed for Jackson. As he laid the baby down, Jackson stirred, his eyes blinking open. For a moment, baby and man locked gazes, and Frank felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him. "I don't know what kind of life you had before, or what kind of people would leave a helpless baby on the side of the road," Frank said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I swear to you, Jackson, that as long as I'm breathing, you'll never know that kind of abandonment again." He knew the challenges that lay ahead would be immense. Frank had lived alone in these woods for years, eschewing human company for the simplicity of nature. Now, he had a baby to care for, a responsibility he had never imagined, but one he embraced without hesitation. As the night wore on, Frank sat by Jackson's side, watching the rise and fall of the baby's chest. He knew that come morning, he would need to venture into town for supplies, formula, diapers, clothes. The thought of interacting with others after so long made him uneasy, but for Jackson, he would face any discomfort. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the cabin, all was peaceful. Blue curled up near the makeshift bed, his presence a silent promise of protection. And Frank, his weathered face softened by the firelight, began to plan for a future he had never envisioned. As dawn broke over the forest, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, it marked not just the start of a new day, but the beginning of a new life for both Frank and Jackson. The road that had been a site of abandonment and despair just hours before now lay far behind them, forgotten in the face of the bond that had formed in the heart of the forest. In that small cabin, surrounded by the ancient trees and watched over by a man who had found an unexpected purpose, Jackson slept peacefully, unaware of the twists of fate that had brought him to this moment. And Frank, his heart full of a love he had never known he was capable of, made a silent vow to be the father this abandoned child deserved. The challenge ahead was daunting, but in that moment, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the cabin windows, hope bloomed as vibrant and unstoppable as the forest itself. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, an unexpected movement in the shadows brought an unforeseen twist to Jackson's fate. A large black bear, drawn by the baby's cries, emerged from the woods. However, instead of being a predator, the bear approached with a gentle curiosity. It lay down beside the baby, shielding him from the cold and loneliness, establishing a connection that defied logic. The bear, which Jackson would later call Bruno, became his unlikely guardian. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The forest floor was a carpet of fallen leaves and soft moss, disturbed only by the occasional scurrying of small nocturnal creatures. It was into this serene setting that Bruno lumbered, his massive form moving with surprising grace through the undergrowth. At first, the bear's approach was cautious. His keen nose had picked up an unfamiliar scent, something small, vulnerable, and distinctly human. As he drew closer to the roadside, The source of the scent became clear, a tiny bundle wrapped in a dirty blanket, emitting soft whimpers that tugged at something deep within the bear's instincts. Bruno's dark eyes, usually wary of human presence, softened as they fell upon Jackson. The bear tilted his head, sniffing the air around the baby. There was no trace of adult human scent nearby. The child was alone, abandoned. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Instead of turning away or reacting with the caution one might expect from a wild animal, Bruno moved closer. With a gentleness that belied his size and strength, he lowered his massive body to the ground beside Jackson. The baby's cries, which had been growing weaker with each passing hour, suddenly ceased. Jackson turned his head, his unfocused eyes drawn to the large, furry presence beside him. Bruno's warm breath ruffled the wisps of hair on the baby's head, and Jackson let out a soft coo. As the night deepened, Bruno remained vigilant. His large body provided a barrier against the chill wind, and his fur offered warmth that the thin blanket could not. When a curious fox approached, drawn by the scent of the vulnerable human child, a low growl from Bruno sent it scurrying back into the darkness. Hours passed, and still, the bear did not move. He seemed to understand, on some primal level, that the tiny creature beside him needed protection. When Jackson began to fuss, likely from hunger, Bruno gently nuzzled him, offering what comfort he could. As dawn broke, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, Bruno faced a decision. The increasing light would soon bring human activity to the road, and his instincts urged him to retreat to the safety of the deep woods. Yet, the thought of leaving the helpless child filled him with an unfamiliar sense of unease. In the end, nature and nurture collided in a most unexpected way. Bruno, guided by instincts he didn't fully understand, carefully picked up the blanket containing Jackson in his mouth. With infinite care, he began to make his way deeper into the forest, away from the road and the dangers it represented. The journey was slow and careful. Bruno paused frequently, setting his precious cargo down to ensure the baby was safe and comfortable. When Jackson cried out in hunger or discomfort, the bear would stop, providing warmth and a sense of security until the child settled. As they traveled, the forest came alive around them. Birds sang their morning songs, small animals scurried about their daily routines, and the trees seemed to whisper secrets to each other in the gentle breeze. Through it all, Bruno moved with purpose, his powerful body navigating the terrain with surprising agility. By midday, they reached a secluded glade. A small stream gurgled nearby, and thick bushes laden with berries surrounded a soft, mossy clearing. It was here that Bruno finally set Jackson down, creating a nest of sorts with fallen leaves and soft moss. The bear's behavior in the following days defied everything known about his species. He remained close to Jackson, leaving only for short periods to forage for food. When he returned, he would bring back berries and soft, ripe fruits, carefully mashing them with his paws before offering them to the hungry baby. Jackson, for his part, seemed to thrive under Bruno's care. The initial shock of abandonment faded, replaced by a sense of security in the bear's constant presence. His cries became less frequent, often turning to gurgles of contentment when Bruno was near. As weeks passed, an extraordinary bond formed between the unlikely pair. Bruno became attuned to Jackson's needs, recognizing different cries for hunger, discomfort, or loneliness. He would play with the baby in his own bearish way, allowing Jackson to grab fistfuls of fur or gently rolling pine cones for the child to watch. The glade became their home, a hidden paradise where the rules of nature seemed suspended. Bruno caught fish from the stream, sharing the softest parts with Jackson. He gathered honey from wild beehives, carefully removing stingers before letting the baby taste the sweet treat. When autumn came, bringing cooler temperatures, Bruno gathered extra leaves and moss, creating a warm den where he and Jackson could snuggle together. Their days fell into a rhythm as natural as the turning of the seasons. Mornings would find them by the stream, Bruno keeping a watchful eye as Jackson splashed in the shallow water. Afternoons were spent in the sunny glade, where Jackson learned to crawl, using Bruno's large form as support. Evenings brought quiet times, the bear's rumbling breaths a soothing lullaby that sent the child to sleep. As Jackson grew, so did his bond with Bruno. The bear became more than just a protector, he was a playmate, a teacher, and a constant companion. Jackson's first words were not Mema or Dada, but a garbled approximation of Bruno, accompanied by delighted giggles when the bear responded with a gentle nuzzle. Their idyllic existence, however, was not without its challenges. Winter brought heavy snows and biting cold. Bruno, fighting against his natural instinct to hibernate, remained active, ensuring their den was warm and that Jackson had enough to eat. He would trudge through deep snow to find winter berries or dig for roots, always returning to find Jackson waiting eagerly for him. There were moments of danger, too. Once, a pack of wolves, driven by hunger, ventured too close to their glade. Bruno stood his ground, his massive form and fierce roars enough to send the predators fleeing. Jackson, oblivious to the danger, clapped his hands in delight at the display, secure in the knowledge that his furry guardian would always protect him. As unbelievable as their situation was, there was a beautiful simplicity to Jackson and Bruno's life together. Free from the complexities of human society, their days were filled with the basic joys of existence: food, play, rest, and the comfort of companionship. Jackson learned the rhythms of the forest, his young mind absorbing lessons that most humans would never experience. Yet, as Jackson grew from a baby into a toddler, subtle changes began to occur. His needs, once simple and easily met by Bruno's care, became more complex. He began to mimic the sounds of the forest bird calls, the rustle of leaves, the gurgle of the stream, but there was a growing awareness in his eyes, a curiosity about a world beyond their glade. Bruno, with an intelligence that seemed to transcend his species, appeared to sense this shift. There were times when he would sit, his dark eyes watching Jackson with what almost seemed like wistfulness. It was as if he understood that their extraordinary time together was not eternal, that the human child would one day need more than the forest and a bear could provide. For now, though, their bond remained unbreakable. Each day brought new adventures, new discoveries, and a deepening of the love between this most unlikely pair. In the heart of the forest, watched over by ancient trees and guided by the wisdom of nature, Jackson and Bruno continued their remarkable journey together, their story a testament to the unexpected forms that family can take. The story unfolded in layers, revealing Jackson's internal struggle and his bond with Bruno. The child grew under the bear's protection, learning to trust his new friend while the world around them remained hostile. But the tranquility was ephemeral. A young couple, Emma and Ryan, seeking purpose in their lives, decided to explore the woods. Fate led them to Jackson and Bruno, and the encounter would change the trajectory of all their lives. The forest had always been a place of mystery and wonder for Emma and Ryan. They had met in college, bonding over their shared love of nature and adventure. Now, 3 years into their marriage, they found themselves at a crossroads. Their jobs in the city left them feeling unfulfilled, yearning for something more meaningful. It was Emma who suggested the camping trip. "Let's get away for a while," she had said, her green eyes sparkling with excitement. "Maybe we'll find what we're looking for out there in the wilderness." Ryan had agreed readily, his rugged features softening into a smile. He loved seeing that spark in Emma's eyes, a reminder of the spirited woman he had fallen in love with. They set out on a crisp autumn morning, their backpacks laden with supplies for a week-long trek through the North Carolina backcountry. The forest welcomed them with a riot of colors, maples blazing red, oaks glowing golden, and evergreens providing a steadfast backdrop of deep green. For the first few days, Emma and Ryan reveled in the simple joys of their journey. They hiked through dappled sunlight, set up camp under star-studded skies, and talked long into the night about their hopes and dreams. Yet, there was an undercurrent of restlessness, a sense that something was missing from their lives. On the 4th day of their trip, they veered off the marked trail, drawn by the sound of a distant waterfall. As they pushed through the undergrowth, the forest around them seemed to change. The trees grew older, more gnarled, their branches reaching out like protective arms. "Ryan," Emma whispered, grabbing her husband's arm. "Do you hear that?" Ryan paused, listening intently. At first, all he could hear was the rustle of leaves and the far-off rush of water. Then, carried on the breeze, came a sound that made his heart skip a beat: a child's laughter. Exchanging a bewildered glance, Emma and Ryan moved forward cautiously. The sound led them to the edge of a sun-dappled glade. What they saw there stopped them in their tracks, their minds struggling to comprehend the scene before them. In the center of the clearing stood a massive black bear, its fur gleaming in the sunlight. But it was what, or rather, who was with the bear that caused Emma to stifle a gasp. A small boy, no more than 3 or 4 years old, was playing at the bear's feet, his delighted giggles filling the air as he tossed pine cones for the enormous creature to bat playfully with its paws. "This can't be real," Ryan murmured, his voice barely audible. As if in response to his words, the bear's head snapped up, its nose twitching as it caught their scent. The child, noticing the bear's sudden alertness, turned to follow its gaze. His eyes, wide and curious, met Emma's, and in that moment, she felt something shift inside her. The bear, Bruno, moved with surprising speed, positioning himself between the child and the newcomers. A low growl rumbled from his chest, a clear warning to the potential threat. Jackson, however, seemed unconcerned. He placed a small hand on Bruno's flank, his voice clear and unafraid as he spoke to the bear. "It's okay, Bruno. They're not bad." Emma and Ryan watched in astonishment as the bear's posture relaxed slightly at the child's touch. Jackson then turned to them, his head tilted in curiosity. "Who are you?" he asked, his speech surprisingly clear for a child who had clearly grown up in the wilderness. It was Emma who found her voice first. Crouching down to appear less threatening, she spoke softly, "Hi there. I'm Emma, and this is Ryan. We didn't mean to scare you or your friend." Jackson's face lit up with a smile. "I'm Jackson, and this is Bruno. He takes care of me." As the initial shock wore off, Emma and Ryan's minds raced with questions. How had this child come to be living in the forest? Where were his parents? And how on earth had he formed such a bond with a wild bear? Over the next few hours, they slowly gained Jackson's trust. The boy was initially wary, staying close to Bruno, but his natural curiosity soon won out. He peppered Emma and Ryan with questions about the world beyond the forest, his eyes wide with wonder at their descriptions of cities, cars, and technology. For their part, Emma and Ryan were captivated by Jackson's story, or at least, the parts he could tell them. His memories of life before the forest were hazy, but he spoke with great affection of his life with Bruno, recounting their daily adventures with enthusiasm. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the glade, Emma and Ryan faced a dilemma. They knew they couldn't leave the child in the forest, no matter how content he seemed or how protective his ursine guardian was. But the thought of separating Jackson from Bruno felt somehow wrong, a violation of the sacred bond they had witnessed. "We can't just take him," Ryan whispered to Emma as Jackson dozed against Bruno's side. "But we can't leave him here either. What do we do?" Emma's eyes were filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to get him to safety, to find out if he has family looking for him. But," she paused, looking at the peaceful scene before them, "we need to do it in a way that doesn't traumatize him. Or Bruno." As night fell, Emma and Ryan set up camp at the edge of the glade, their minds whirling with plans and possibilities. They knew that the discovery of Jackson would change their lives forever, but they couldn't have anticipated just how profound that change would be. The next morning brought new challenges. Jackson, while friendly, was reluctant to leave the only home he could remember. Bruno, sensing the shift in dynamics, grew increasingly agitated, his protective instincts warring with an apparent understanding that these humans might be able to provide Jackson with things he could not. It was Emma who finally broke the impasse. With gentle words and patience, she explained to Jackson the importance of connecting with other humans, of learning about the world beyond the forest. She promised that they would do everything in their power to ensure he could still visit Bruno, that their bond would not be severed. "But what about Bruno?" Jackson asked, his small face creased with worry. "He'll be all alone." Ryan, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "What if we found a way for Bruno to come with us? Not to live in the city," he added quickly, seeing the alarm on Emma's face, "but somewhere nearby. A place where he could be safe and you could visit him." The suggestion lit a spark of hope in Jackson's eyes. Over the next few days, as they slowly made their way out of the forest, Emma and Ryan began to formulate a plan. They would need help from wildlife experts, child services, and perhaps even legal counsel. But they were committed to finding a solution that would honor the extraordinary relationship between Jackson and Bruno while ensuring the child's well-being and future. As they finally emerged from the forest, Jackson riding on Ryan's shoulders and Bruno following at a cautious distance, Emma and Ryan knew their lives had been irrevocably changed. The purpose they had been seeking had found them in the most unexpected way. Looking at Jackson's face, alight with a mixture of excitement and apprehension at the new world opening up before him, Emma felt a surge of protectiveness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, an unconventional family born in the heart of the wilderness. The road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles. There would be questions to answer, authorities to convince, and a delicate balance to maintain between Jackson's need for human society and his deep connection to Bruno and the forest. But as they took their first steps into this new chapter, Emma and Ryan were filled with a sense of purpose and hope. They had set out into the forest seeking meaning in their lives. They emerged with a child to protect, a bear to accommodate, and a story that would challenge the boundaries of love, family, and the connection between humans and nature. It was not the purpose they had imagined finding, but it was one they embraced with open hearts and unwavering determination. Emma and Ryan, initially hesitant, decided to welcome Jackson into their home. In the warmth of his new environment, Jackson began to recover from the invisible scars that his abandoned childhood had inflicted upon him. However, the shadow of the past was not long in manifesting itself. Mysterious men, searching for the boy, began to infiltrate the woods, threatening the peace that Jackson had found. The transition from forest to civilization was not an easy one for Jackson. The cacophony of city sounds, the confinement of walls, and the absence of his constant companion, Bruno, were all significant challenges. Emma and Ryan had converted their modest suburban home into a sanctuary, trying to bridge the gap between Jackson's forest upbringing and his new life. Their backyard became a miniature wilderness. They planted trees, created a small pond, and even constructed a cozy den-like structure where Jackson could retreat when the world felt too overwhelming. It was here that Jackson spent most of his time in those first few weeks, often calling out for Bruno in his sleep. Emma and Ryan had managed to secure a special arrangement with a nearby wildlife sanctuary. Bruno, under the care of experienced handlers, was housed in a spacious, forested enclosure just a short drive from their home. 3 times a week, they would take Jackson to visit his bear friend, these reunions filled with a joy that brought tears to Emma's eyes. As the days turned into weeks, Jackson slowly began to adapt. His natural curiosity helped, leading him to explore every nook and cranny of the house. He was fascinated by running water, electricity, and the magic of television. Emma and Ryan patiently explained each new discovery, their hearts swelling with love for this remarkable child. Jackson's first day of school was a milestone fraught with anxiety for all of them. Emma and Ryan had worked tirelessly with child psychologists and education specialists to prepare Jackson and the school for this moment. As they watched him walk into the classroom, his small hand clutching his forest-themed backpack, they held their breath, hoping they had made the right decision. To everyone's relief, Jackson's innate friendliness and unique perspective made him a subject of fascination for his classmates. His tales of life with Bruno, while met with skepticism by some adults, enthralled the other children. Jackson found himself surrounded by eager listeners during recess, recounting his forest adventures. At home, Emma and Ryan continued to nurture Jackson's connection to nature. They took him on hikes, taught him about different plants and animals, and encouraged his natural affinity for the outdoors. Slowly but surely, Jackson was bridging his 2 worlds, finding a balance between his forest upbringing and his new life. But as autumn gave way to winter, a disquieting change began to unfold. It started with small things, a feeling of being watched during their trips to the wildlife sanctuary, unfamiliar cars lingering a bit too long on their street. Emma dismissed these as paranoia at first, the natural anxiety of a new parent. But Ryan, his instincts honed by years in the wilderness, felt the wrongness in his bones. Their fears were confirmed on a crisp December morning. Jackson, excited about the first snowfall of the season, was playing in the backyard when Emma noticed a man watching from the street. He was trying to be inconspicuous, but his intent focus on Jackson sent chills down her spine. When confronted, the man quickly departed, but the incident left Emma and Ryan shaken. They began to take precautions, installing a security system, varying their routines, and always ensuring one of them was with Jackson. Despite their efforts to shield him, Jackson sensed the change in atmosphere. His nightmares, which had been subsiding, returned with renewed intensity. He would wake up crying for Bruno, convinced that something was coming to take him away. Emma and Ryan's concerns deepened when they noticed similar strange occurrences during their visits to Bruno. Unknown vehicles would be parked near the sanctuary, their occupants watching a little too closely. Once, Ryan was sure he saw someone taking photos from the tree line. The situation came to a head one snowy evening in January. Emma was helping Jackson with his homework when they heard the crunch of footsteps outside. Ryan, who had been in the kitchen, suddenly went still, his whole body alert like a deer sensing a predator. In a flash, he was at Jackson's side, scooping the boy up and heading for the back door. "We need to go," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Now." Emma didn't question him. She grabbed their emergency bag, a precaution they had put together weeks ago, and followed Ryan out into the cold night air. They made their way through backyards and side streets, Ryan's wilderness skills guiding them away from main roads and potential pursuers. Jackson, sensing the gravity of the situation, remained quiet in Ryan's arms, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and trust. Their destination was clear, the wildlife sanctuary. As they approached the familiar gates, Emma's heart sank. 2 unfamiliar cars were parked outside, and she could see flashlight beams moving inside the compound. Ryan made a split-second decision. Instead of heading for the main entrance, he led them to a seldom-used side gate. With trembling hands, Emma worked the lock while Ryan kept watch. Jackson held close to his chest. Once inside, they stuck to the shadows, making their way to Bruno's enclosure. The bear, as if sensing their distress, was already at the fence, his massive form a comforting presence in the darkness. "Bruno," Jackson whispered, reaching out to touch his old friend's fur through the fence. The bear rumbled softly in response, his dark eyes alert and watchful. It was at that moment that they heard voices approaching. Emma and Ryan exchanged a panicked look, realizing they were trapped. But then, to their amazement, Bruno began to paw at the gate of his enclosure. The latch, designed more to keep people out than to keep the bear in, gave way under his strength. Without hesitation, Bruno lumbered out and positioned himself protectively in front of Jackson, Emma, and Ryan. As the flashlight beams drew nearer, accompanied by the sound of men's voices, they found themselves facing a choice that would change their lives forever. "We can't go back," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever's happening, whoever these people are, they won't stop." Emma nodded, her mind racing. "But where can we go? How can we just disappear?" It was Jackson who provided the answer. Looking up at Bruno, then back at Emma and Ryan, he said with the simple wisdom of a child, "We go to the forest. Bruno will protect us." In that moment, as the voices grew louder and the flashlight beams came ever closer, Emma and Ryan made their decision. With Bruno leading the way, they slipped into the darkness of the surrounding woods, leaving behind the trappings of civilization for the uncertain sanctuary of the wilderness. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sounds of pursuit faded behind them. The night was cold, the snow crunching beneath their feet, but there was a strange sense of rightness to their flight. Jackson, now walking between Emma and Ryan, with Bruno's massive form clearing the path ahead, seemed more at ease than he had been in weeks. They walked through the night, guided by Ryan's wilderness skills and Bruno's instincts. As dawn broke, painting the snow-covered forest in hues of pink and gold, they found themselves in a secluded valley, far from any trails or roads. Exhausted but relieved, they made camp in the shelter of a rocky overhang. As Jackson curled up between Bruno's paws, falling into a peaceful sleep for the first time in months, Emma and Ryan looked at each other, the enormity of their decision sinking in. They had left everything behind: their home, their jobs, their entire lives, to protect this extraordinary child and honor his unique bond with Bruno. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But as they watched Jackson sleep, safe and content in the embrace of his bear guardian, they knew they had made the right choice. The forest around them was alive with the sounds of a new day beginning. Birds called to one another, small animals rustled in the underbrush, and a gentle breeze whispered through the trees. It was a new beginning for all of them, a family forged in the heart of the wilderness, bound together by love, trust, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his bear. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Emma and Ryan began to plan their new life. They would need to be constantly on the move, always one step ahead of whoever was pursuing them. But they had each other, they had Bruno's strength and protection, and they had the resilience and adaptability that Jackson had learned in his early years in the forest. It would not be an easy life, but as they looked at each other, then at Jackson and Bruno, they knew it would be a life filled with love, adventure, and the kind of freedom that only the wilderness could provide. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a most unconventional family, but a family nonetheless. The moral dilemmas became palpable. Emma and Ryan struggled between protecting the child and confronting those who might be his true parents. Jackson, torn between his love for his caregivers and the need to understand his origins, felt the weight of his choices. Amidst the conflict, Bruno, the bear, remained by his side, a symbol of strength and protection, reminding him that love can come from unexpected places. The tension reached its peak when the men arrived at the cabin. Jackson, in a moment of courage and clarity, decided to face his past, not as a burden, but as a part of his identity. With the support of Emma, Ryan, and Bruno, he stood up, ready to claim his life and make the choices that would shape his future. The forest had become their sanctuary and their prison. 4 months, Emma, Ryan, Jackson, and Bruno had been living a nomadic existence, moving from one hidden spot to another, always wary of the sounds of pursuit. They had learned to live off the land, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Ryan's wilderness skills and Bruno's natural instincts kept them safe and fed, while Emma's nurturing presence helped Jackson navigate the emotional turmoil of their situation. Despite the constant movement and the ever-present threat of discovery, there were moments of joy and wonder. Jackson thrived in the wilderness, his connection to nature deepening in ways that amazed Emma and Ryan. He could identify plants and animal tracks with ease, and his ability to communicate with Bruno seemed to grow stronger by the day. But as winter gave way to spring, the weight of their situation began to take its toll. Emma and Ryan found themselves grappling with the morality of their choices. Were they truly protecting Jackson, or were they denying him the chance to know his real family? The question hung over them like a storm cloud, coloring even their brightest moments with shades of doubt. Jackson, too, was changing. As he grew older and more aware, questions about his past began to surface. "Why are we always running?" he would ask. "Who are the bad men? Did I have another family before you?" These questions tore at Emma and Ryan's hearts. They had always promised to be honest with Jackson, but how could they explain a situation they themselves didn't fully understand? They did their best to answer truthfully, explaining that there were people looking for him, but that they didn't know if these people had good intentions. "But what if they're my real parents?" Jackson asked one night, his voice small and uncertain. "Don't I have the right to know?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Emma and Ryan exchanged a look, realizing that they couldn't keep running forever. They needed answers, not just for Jackson's sake, but for their own peace of mind. It was Bruno who provided an unexpected solution. One misty morning, the bear began to lead them on a meandering path through the forest. At first, Emma and Ryan thought he was just foraging, but as the day wore on, they realized he was guiding them with purpose. As the sun began to set, they found themselves on the outskirts of a small, isolated cabin. It was weathered and clearly abandoned, but it offered a level of shelter and security they hadn't known in months. More importantly, it felt familiar to Jackson. "I've been here before," he whispered, his eyes wide as he took in the overgrown clearing and the dilapidated structure. "In my dreams." Emma and Ryan approached the cabin cautiously, but Bruno seemed at ease, as if he had brought them home. Inside, beneath a layer of dust and neglect, they found signs of a life interrupted: faded photographs, old toys, and a calendar stopped on a date nearly 5 years past. As they explored, the pieces began to fall into place. This cabin, it seemed, was where Jackson's story had begun. Among the remnants of the past, they found clues to his identity: a birth certificate, family photos, and letters that painted a picture of a young couple who had retreated to the wilderness to raise their child away from the complexities of modern life. But the story took a dark turn. The letters spoke of growing paranoia, of a fear that they were coming to take their child. The final entry in a worn journal described a plan to hide the baby in the forest, to keep him safe from unnamed threats. As Emma read the journal aloud, her voice trembling, Jackson listened with a mix of fascination and fear. Bruno, sensing the boy's distress, moved closer, offering silent support. "So my parents, they left me on purpose?" Jackson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It seems they thought they were protecting you, buddy. They were scared and made a choice they thought was right." Emma joined them, her eyes filled with tears. "But Jackson, you need to know that leaving you was their choice. It doesn't change who you are or how much we love you." Jackson nodded slowly, processing this new information. Then, with a maturity that belied his years, he said, I think I want to meet them. Not to leave you," he added quickly, seeing the flash of fear in Emma and Ryan's eyes, "but to understand. And to tell them I'm okay." The decision made, they began to plan. Using the information found in the cabin, they pieced together the identities of Jackson's biological parents. It was a risky move, but they all felt it was necessary for closure. They sent out cautious feelers, using the few contacts they still trusted. Days turned to weeks as they waited for a response, the tension growing with each passing day. Bruno remained ever vigilant, his presence a constant reminder of the unique family they had formed. Finally, word came back. Jackson's biological parents wanted to meet. A meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a clearing in the forest, not far from the cabin where it had all begun. The day of the meeting dawned clear and crisp. Jackson stood between Emma and Ryan, Bruno a solid presence at his back, as two figures emerged from the trees on the other side of the clearing. The tension was palpable, years of fear and misunderstanding hanging in the air between them. Jackson's biological parents, Mark and Sarah, looked older than their years, worn down by guilt and regret. Their eyes filled with tears as they saw Jackson, alive and thriving. "You've grown so much," Sarah whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Jackson regarded them with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Why did you leave me?" he asked, his voice steady and clear. Mark stepped forward, his hands trembling. "We thought we were protecting you. We were wrong, so terribly wrong. Can you ever forgive us?" The clearing fell silent as Jackson considered their words. Then, with the wisdom of a child who had known both abandonment and unconditional love, he spoke. "I forgive you," he said softly. "But Emma and Ryan are my parents now. And Bruno is my family too." As if on cue, Bruno lumbered forward, positioning himself protectively near Jackson. Mark and Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of the massive bear, but Jackson simply reached out and stroked Bruno's fur, a small smile on his face. "This is who I am," Jackson continued. "I'm a boy who was raised by a bear, found by two amazing people, and loved more than I could ever imagine. I want to know you, but I don't want to leave my family." Emma and Ryan, their hearts swelling with pride and love, stepped forward to stand beside Jackson. "We're not here to keep you apart," Ryan said to Mark and Sarah. "We're here to find a way forward that honors Jackson's past and his present." The conversation that followed was long and emotional. There were tears, apologies, and tentative steps towards understanding. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing, a new kind of peace settled over them all. They agreed to move forward slowly, with supervised visits and open communication. Jackson would remain with Emma and Ryan, with Bruno as his constant companion, but he would have the opportunity to build a relationship with Mark and Sarah as well. As they parted ways that evening, Jackson felt a sense of completeness he had never known before. He had faced his past, not as a burden, but as a part of his extraordinary journey. With Emma and Ryan's love, Bruno's protection, and the promise of getting to know his biological parents, Jackson felt ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. That night, as they made camp under the stars, their small family felt more solid than ever. Emma and Ryan watched as Jackson curled up against Bruno's side, the bear's protective presence a testament to the unconventional but unbreakable bonds they had formed. "We did the right thing," Emma whispered, leaning into Ryan's embrace. Ryan nodded, his eyes on the sleeping forms of Jackson and Bruno. "We gave him roots and wings," he said softly. "The courage to face his past and the strength to shape his future." As the fire crackled and the forest whispered its nightly lullaby, They all drifted off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that love, in all its forms, had triumphed over fear and uncertainty. The journey ahead would have its challenges, but together, human and bear alike, they were ready to face whatever came their way.